Hey beauties, it's me, Avik. Welcome to the show. Story time is on, and we need to sit back for a while, do some skincare, and relax while I'm telling you this crazy story I found on the internet. This story involves a famous singer in Kuwait, multiple witnesses, police reports, the whole thing, everything. She quit singing after this incident, and after you hear what happened to her, you will understand why she never performed again. So grab your face mask, get comfortable, maybe turn on some extra lights, and let me tell you about the night Nora and her band performed at a wedding that shouldn't have existed. Let's get started. So this actually happened to a singer named Nora back in 1997 in Kuwait. And I know everyone says their ghost story is true, but this one is different. Nora was pretty famous back then. She had this incredible voice and ran a wedding band that was basically the go-to group if you wanted your celebration to be remembered. And you know how it is with wedding singers in the Middle East. They're like rock stars in their own right. But anyways, it was a regular summer evening when she got the call. Kuwait in summer is absolute hell, by the way. So here we're talking 45 plus degrees Celsius, like 113 Fahrenheit, the kind of heat where your car steering wheel can burn your hands. And Nora had just gotten home from another wedding gig, probably exhausted when her landline rang. And remember, this was 1997. No mobile really, just those chunky home phones everyone had. And the guy on the other end spoke in really formal, classical Arabic. That was the first slightly weird thing, but whatever. Some of the older traditional families still spoke that way. He said his daughter was getting married and he'd heard Nora was the best. Could she and her band perform in 3 weeks? Nora checked her schedule and the date was free, so they talked money. He was offering good money, half up front like usual, and then he gave her the address. And this is where it starts getting a bit odd. The location was way outside the city, past the 6th Ring Road, out toward Jara, then another 20 kilometers beyond the farms. He said someone would meet them at a water tower to guide them the rest of the way. Now, this wasn't completely crazy. Lots of wealthy families back then still did weddings at home instead of hotels. The really old money families, the ones whose wealth came from pearls and trade before oil, they often had these massive estates outside the city where they could celebrate privately, away from the prying eyes and gossip. So Nora didn't think too much of it. The money showed up 2 days later, cash in an envelope, no return address. A bit unusual, but some families are weird about privacy. 3 weeks passed. Nora and her band practiced all the usual wedding songs, you know, the classics, the ones every Khaliji wedding has to have. Khaliji basically means Gulf Arab. So we're talking traditional songs from Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, UAE, that whole region. Her band was tight. Layla played oud, that's like a Middle Eastern lute, this beautiful pear-shaped stringed instrument. Miam was on drums, Fatima and Sarah did backup vocals, and this young guy, Hassan, handled all their equipment. They'd been performing together for 7 years and had an amazing reputation. The day of the wedding came, they loaded up 2 cars, Nora's Land Cruiser and Hassan's beat-up pickup truck, and headed out just before sunset. They drove north on the Jara Road, watching the city gradually fade into suburbs, then scattered farms, then just desert. The water tower appeared right where the guy said it would be, this massive concrete thing rising up out of nowhere. And there was someone waiting. A man in traditional dress, wearing a white dish dash, that's the long white robe Gulf men wear, and a red checked gutra, the headscarf, his face half covered in the dim light. He gestured for them to follow him and got into this old Mercedes that looked like it was from the 70s, but was somehow gleaming like new. They followed him off the main road onto what was barely even a track, just tire marks in the sand, really. Illa was riding with Nora, and she started shifting around uncomfortably. "This is really far out," she said. "Rich people like their space," Nora replied. But honestly, she was starting to feel uneasy too. You know that tightness in your stomach when something's not quite right, but you can't put your finger on it? They drove through the dunes for like half an hour in the dark. Kuwait's landscape is so flat and featureless that at night you can get completely disoriented. And then, suddenly, there it was, this absolutely massive mansion. It was built in the old Kuwaiti style, you know, with wind towers, these traditional cooling towers that catch the breeze, and courtyards. But huge, way bigger than it needed to be, and every window was blazing with light. despite being in the middle of nowhere. It looked perfectly maintained. The Mercedes just disappeared around back, and their guide was gone before Nora could even say thanks. A woman met them at the door, fully veiled in that old-fashioned way you hardly ever saw by the 90s. She led them through these gorgeous corridors with Persian carpets and brass lanterns, past rooms full of cushions and low tables loaded with dates and Arabic coffee. The whole place smelled intensely of bakor. That's traditional incense made from wood chips soaked in fragrant oils. Really common in the Gulf, but like a lot of it, almost too much. "You will perform here," she said, showing them to this big courtyard open to the sky, and there was a proper stage set up with outlets and everything. The bride arrives at midnight, started warming up at 10:30. Then she just disappeared before they could ask questions. They set up their equipment while the women changed into their performance outfits, those elaborate, heavily embroidered dresses and jewel tones, hair domed up high, full stage makeup. This was their work uniform, basically. Hassan got the sound system running, and they did a sound check around 10. But something weird happened during the sound check, though. Nora's voice echoed in this really strange way, like the space was too big and too small at the same time. She brushed it off as acoustics being weird. At 10:30, the guests started arriving, and this is where things got properly strange. They just appeared. Like 1 second an area would be empty, and then you'd look again, and there'd be a cluster of people there. They came in groups, women in traditional dress, men in white dashas, emerging from doorways, rounding corners, just suddenly being there. Within 20 minutes, the courtyard was absolutely packed, easily 300 people, maybe more. Nora had performed for bigger crowds, so she wasn't intimidated. She nodded to her band, and they launched into a traditional welcome song. The crowd seemed to love it, ululating loudly, that high-pitched trilling sound women make at celebrations, and they started to dance. But something felt off. At first, Nora couldn't figure out what was bothering her. The guests were enthusiastic, maybe a little too enthusiastic. They danced with this intense energy, with their movements strangely fluid and synchronized. It reminded her of something, but she couldn't quite place what. She glanced over at Layla, who was playing mechanically, staring at nothing in particular. By 11:30, the weirdness had become impossible to ignore. The way these people moved, it wasn't quite human. That's the only way to describe it. Joints bending in ways that looked subtly wrong. They danced without stopping, without even pausing to catch their breath or chat with each other like people normally do. The dancing was hypnotic, almost ritualistic, like the same movements repeating over and over in patterns that made Nora's head hurt to even watch. Some guests came up to the stage to offer congratulations and tips, totally normal wedding behavior, but when the first woman pressed money into Nora's hand, Nora felt something that made her blood run cold. The woman's skin was burning hot, not like a fever, but like touching metal that's been sitting in the sun, and hard, leathery, completely unlike human skin. The woman smiled with these really white teeth and went back to dancing. Nora caught Fatima's eyes across the stage. Her backup singer had gone pale under all her makeup, and her hands were shaking on the microphone. She'd felt it too when someone touched her. Nora gave a tiny shake of her head. Don't react, keep performing. The night dragged on. Midnight came and went, no bride. The crowd just kept dancing, getting more and more frenzied, more synchronized. Nora's throat was killing her, but she kept singing, her professional training kicking in, even as terror built in her chest. Next to her, Miam was pounding the drums mechanically, her jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. And then, sometime after midnight, Nora was never sure exactly when, everything changed. She was in the middle of a song when she noticed. At first, she thought the incense soak had gotten thicker, making it hard to see. But then she saw clearly, and she wished she hadn't. The legs of those guests weren't entirely human anymore. They ended in these hooved feet, dark and cloven like a goat's or sheep's, moving with an animal's grace. Their hands, when they raised them while dancing, had these elongated fingers that tapered to points, nails gleaming like horn. But their faces were still human, and that was somehow the worst part. Human faces smiling and laughing on top of these increasingly inhuman bodies. Dancing, always dancing. Sarah's voice completely cracked. She'd stopped singing, just standing there with her mouth open, frozen. Hassan at the soundboard had gone gray, looking like he might pass out. Only Nora, Layla, Miyam, and Fatima kept going, pure muscle memory and performance discipline overriding their terror. The things dancing, Nora couldn't think of them as guests anymore. They didn't seem to notice or care that the band was freaking out. They danced harder, their movements becoming unmistakably inhuman. So she kept singing, voice cracking, tears streaming down her makeup and ruining her makeup. The others kept playing, looking like they were barely holding it together. Time stopped making sense. Each song felt like it lasted hours. Nora's entire world became just next note, next breath, next moment of not running, not screaming. And then, at what her watch later told her was 3 a.m., every single light went out. The darkness was total, like